General Forrest and his brigade camped in this area here, waiting for his men to catch up. His last camp being temporarily at Moulton, Alabama. His command was strung out over 3 miles at this period of time. He held a meeting with his regimental commanders here, sending Colonel Biffle's 9th Tennessee around the long way through Stringer's Gap and cut off straight at the crossroads. He sent Major McLemore's 4th Tennessee around the left of here through Davis Gap. Colonel Edmondson's 11th Tennessee would attack Colonel Strait around the right end of Strait's command. Colonel Roddy would attack with his 4th Alabama head on. General Forrest and his staff would enter the area through the Parker's Gap Road at this period of time.
Now, for orientation purposes, we're looking at the Morgan County line, Morgan County being the top portion of your screen. This is Highway 157 going past Campground, which is the area where Forrest's men spent the night before the battle at Battleground. This is the path taken by Forrest and Strait up toward Staples Hollow and into the Battleground area. These are the areas where the Davis and Stringer gaps are located. And again, this is the Battleground area. We're going to swing down now to almost ground level. We're looking north now in the top portion of the screen in Morgan County. Now we're swinging around looking toward the eastern portion. Highway 157 in the black line in the middle of your screen. And now we're looking down south toward Cullman County. This is the path taken again by Forrest and Strait up toward Staples Hollow, which is where Herman will be next.
General Forrest sent Captain William Forrest on ahead of his command, along with Captain Farrell's Light Georgia battery with 2 6-pounders. They followed Colonel Strait to this valley, and that night Captain Forrest and Captain Farrell had got within 600 yards or hearing distance of Colonel Strait, camped in this valley, as you see below us. The Old Days Gap Road was to my right, and if you'll notice when he pans that way, some of the old buildings are still in existence down there that were here that night or that morning. The battle took place in this valley. This Old Days Gap Road, as you see in front of me, went through this valley and up the draw and came out on top up there on the old Corn Road.
For orientation purposes, we're looking at an overhead view of the Staples Hollow area. This is the path taken by Strait's men up toward Battleground. This is the Morgan County, Cullman County line. This, of course, is the Battleground area. And this is the area where Strait's men will be camped the night before the Battleground attack. Then we'll swing down to ground level to get a better view of the area and Highway 157 in the bottom left-hand portion of your screen.
This is the upper end of the Days Gap Road that we saw in Staples Hollow below. If you'll notice, the little gap down through there is actually 2 roads that go down to the bottom and works its way back into the pastures of Staples Hollow. As you see where the mountain comes down over there, that is actually Staples Hollow at the bottom of that mountain right there. Now, you can't see it now, but a few years back you could see the old road actually going down this ridge right here, down between the trees there. It was well defined at that period of time. Rucker Agee had taken his picture right over there to the right of those bluffs, so this confirmed that this is the route that Colonel Strait and and his men had came up this morning.
An overhead view of the battleground scene. This is the approximate location of Straight's men, one of his, or a couple of his guns sitting here firing across. This is Mac Carter's place, and this is the ravine where the ambush will take place. Over here is where Herman Stringle will be standing, a couple of Farrell's guns in that V right area right there. This is one of the locations of some of Morton's battery firing across towards Strait in this direction here. Now we'll drop down to ground level, or as close as we can get. Again, we're looking north now into Morgan County. We'll start swinging around so that we're above the position of the Confederates, of Forrest's men and his batteries that will be firing east over toward Straight's location. Again, right here is one of Farrell's locations, one of his batteries. Here's one of Morton's gun, or a couple of Morton's guns firing across.
A great event took place on this location by Colonel Strait and General Forrest's men. On your hill over there to the left, on the opposite side, was where the ambush took place, and the ridge line on the other side of those trees right there was where the Federal lines were waiting for Captain William Forrest and his men to come up this road. As we pan to the right, this is the old Corn Road, as you see in this area here. Now, Colonel Strait could hear the booming back down in the valley, which was part of the Farrell's artillery unit, and also Captain Bill Forrest's men down at the Staples Hollow area. What happened, Strait had his men strung out about 3 miles along this road, and when he got them all through up to the gap up there, he told Captain Forrest, he told Captain Smith to go back down the valley and attract the attention of these Confederates in Staples Hollow, and that he did. When he got down to the valley, they started chasing him. They dropped their food. The Confederates were eating the food leftovers that Colonel Straight's men had left below. Most of them had not eaten in about 2 days, so they're very hungry. They had stopped to eat. But when the Yankee soldiers came on down, the cavalry, it was too much to believe, so they started chasing them up this road, around like this, and they chased down like this way, and this way. And what happened, the little ridge that goes up over there dropped into a small little ravine there. And on the left was a curious ravine which dropped off the mountain, and on the right was a marshy place. This would be an excellent place for an ambush. So Forrest's young brother had pulled him into this, went into the trap, following Captain Smith into this area. Now, after this event took place, on your the Confederate units was pulling up in this area. You only had 2 roads, one road from the Parker's Gap Road and one road from the Days Gap Road. So you can see it was a very complicated position for General Forrest to get all of his men up here at the same time and try to get them into a fighting position. But hot on the trail of Captain Forrest, and then, of course, Captain Farrell's men was the 11th Tennessee, and we had Julian's Alabama Cavalry following also, came up this road, hot on the trail of the other Confederate units. Well, when we got up here, Colonel Edmondson placed his men along this ridge line that you see right here in the front of us there. And when he done that, he put Major W.R. Julian to the right, and Julian's Alabama Cavalry Partisan Battalion along the ridge there in the ravine as a backup for Colonel Edmondson, and to his right. We also had Lieutenant Colonel W.A. Johnson's 4th Alabama Cavalry. That'd be Roddy's old cavalry. Roddy was a 4th Alabama, so this is Roddy's old cavalry. Roddy being in the area also. Captain Morton's battery was part of the Forrest Brigade. We had to the right over in this area where the chicken houses are, 2 guns from Morton. And on opposite side, over just about, we pan around to the home on a ridge over there, was 2 more field guns of Captain Morton's. They had longer range, and they could go into the area such as where the schoolhouse is now, or the Thomas place. It had a long range hitting. Well, right in this area here, we had Captain Farrell's 2 6-pound light artillery. They had a very short range, but they were very accurate. So we had those guns all in place. Now, when Colonel Edmondson on a ridge over there had charged across, Edmondson's men got in big time trouble. On the charge over there, he lost 40 men wounded and killed from the 11th Tennessee. Well, there was a young lieutenant named Gould. Gould brought his artillery up this road and set them up there just about where Mac Carter's place is, too close to the Federal lines, within 300 yards. And Colonel Strait could not believe that he had done that. So this is where he put his play into effect to go across the ravine over there and capture Lieutenant Gould's 2 rifles that General Forrest was very, very hot about, because they were very accurate and a long range, the forerunners of our field artillery today. Now, he had used those 2 rifles on General Dodge's outfit at Town Creek, because he could sit on a hillside a long way off and hit the Federal forces on the opposite hill, and the Federal forces had no gun at that time to reach over there. So they had to bring up some 10-pound Parrots to get after the force men up there. Now, the 2 units we said came up this road here had came from what they call Mount Moriah. Now, on 28 April, General Forrest pulled 11th Tennessee Cavalry and Julian's Alabama Partisan Battalion over to Mount Moriah to make sure that no one got behind General Forrest and make sure there wasn't another Federal unit coming up behind them. But from there he came down along with a section of battery of Farrell's battery was with him also. They came down into Staples Holler, took the old road, the Old Corn Road, up the mountain and came along this road. Following them, of course, was Morton's battery, and also the guns of Farrell was coming up the ridge at the same time. We're now in the positions of Captain William Morton's artillery battery. From here he had 2 long barrel field guns, 12-pounders. He was firing from this position over to the, if you see the tall tree there, that was the 80th Illinois and the 3rd Ohio dug in across that line over there. If you notice, that would be Mr. Thomas's place at Battleground there. And just to the right of the tall tree is where Colonel Strait's command was. That is the beyond that would be the schoolhouse. Just below those trees out there would be the schoolhouse area. Captain Morton was throwing these shells into the tree line there, behind the tree line. I believe it's in the vicinity of the school. Now, Colonel Strait took his horses and mules and hid them behind those tree lines over there, almost directly across from where the Battleground School is now. He had put his horses and mules in there, protecting from the artillery and from the bullets and stuff that day.
This is a bird's eye view. This is the Battleground area to the right of the screen. Of course, here's the school, Battleground School, and we'll take a look here at the Highway 157, the right-hand side of your screen, that purple line. The Cullman County and Morgan County line at the top of the screen. Here's Battleground School here, and of course going out west, this is the Old Corn Road. Now what we'll do is we will take a look, we'll drop down to ground level, again looking north as we do. This is a little valley, one of those little valleys to the west of Highway 157. There's a school again, and we'll start moving around so that we start looking east. Now, as we start looking east, you will see the Battleground Road, you see, Old Corn Road right here. Now, that's where Mac Carter lives. where the scene of the ambush was. Now we go across the Morgan County line. We start to look east, southeast. Now we're looking south down toward Cullman. And at the bottom of the screen, the purple line is Highway 157, as you can see. And then we come back around, again, the school's right to the right there. And we're looking back north again. And that's the view that we have.
The turn of events that was to take place here on this location and this site will forever be in the pages of history. What happened is Colonel Strait had came over the ridge here. His column was strung out 3 miles back down into Staples Hollow. And at Staples Hollow, the rear guard and the rear kitchen portion of Colonel Strait was eating breakfast, the leftovers, and packing up the wagons and what have you. Well, Captain Forrest and Captain C.B. Farrell, his men, when they overtook the camp down there, hey, they hadn't eaten in probably 2 to 3 days, and so they said, let's have some breakfast, we're starved. Though they immediately sat down and started eating and whatever, and by that time Colonel Strait on the mountain up here had heard the booming in the valley below. So he said, we're going to set a trap for those guys when they get there. Right here, just across this ridge here is an excellent place to set an ambush. So he said, Captain D.D. Smith, I want you to take a squad of men and go back down the mountain and harass Confederates. Captain D.D. Smith did just that. He went down in the valley and harassed Confederates, and of course they crawled on their horse, the cavalry horses, and immediately started chasing Smith up the Old Corn Road, as you see behind me here, running full steam. Captain Smith, when he cleared this ridge right here, he was almost to the ambush site. When he went through the ambush site, they fell more trees there, and for an ambush was set. So when Captain Forrest came over this ridge here, as you see behind me here, you can see what a perfect ambush the side they had picked. You couldn't see what's beyond this little rise right here. As we go forward, you will see what I'm talking about. On your left of this ridge, over to my left, which is the Thomas place, the 3rd Ohio and the 80th Illinois was lined up across that ridge there, all the way down to the ambush site. And on my right there, walking this way, was the 51st Indiana, Colonel Sheets' outfit, the old Colonel Strait unit, because Colonel Strait was the brigade commander. And on his left, facing over there, would be the 73rd Indiana Colonel Hathaway, which was later killed at Lawrence Plantation. Now, Colonel Sheets was also killed right here in this swampy area, as we see. He was leading a charge across this area. Now, the ambush took place, of course, in this valley, little draw right here. Now, as we pan to the left, you will see Mac Carter's home, and on the corner of Mac Carter's place, he has a replica of a 3 5/8 inch rifle. Now, there were 2 of them up on this ridge line within 300 yards of Colonel Strait. Now, these 2 rifles had a range of about 1,850 yards. They were deadly. They had just been used on the Federal forces at Town Creek, and the Federal force could not fire back with 12-pounders, so they had to bring up some 20-pounders, 10-pounders to reach the Confederate forces across Town Creek. Now, across the ridge, as you're looking, the old Federal forces over there had Sharp's breech-load carbines, and they could probably get off 5 shots of the old Confederate musket rifles, about 5 to 1. And also we found a few hulls of Spencer's out here. Spencer's was a deadly rifle, 8-shot rifle, as a carbine type, and they could probably get off 20 rounds in 1 minute. So you can see that the old Confederate forces was badly outnumbered and outgunned here at this location. Now, this event was taking place after the ambush. The ambush was full of, that time full of wounded men, wounded and dying horses. The valley would have been full of smoke. Noise and would be terrible. Both sides, the face would be completely black and her hands would be black from all the black powder and stuff that's taking place that day. From the top of this hill, this point here, you can see the ambush site below. When we topped that hill, you can see when you run over the hill what an excellent place the ambush site was. On your left you have the precarious ravine that Strait had talked about. On your right was a swampy area, went down about 1,000 yards. Excellent place for an ambush. What happened after Captain D.D. Smith went back and drew Captain Bill Forrest up the road real fast, he said, "Come on, chase me." And when he got to the top of his hill, they went down and got through the gap on the other side of the hill right there. The gap closed. And on your left you had the 3rd Ohio and 80th Illinois. On your right you had 51st Indiana, Colonel Sheets, and on his side was Colonel Hathaway, the 73rd Indiana. Colonel Sheets had Colonel Strait's 51st Indiana, which is his home company there, home regiment. So Colonel Strait was directly behind Colonel Sheets over there, just about where the school is, in his command. Colonel Strait was hiding his mules and horses in that ridge behind the school to the left and right of the school over there, so they would not be hit from artillery shells and rounds. So the ambush was set and the ambush to take place. Over the ridge came Captain Bill Forrest. When he arrived at the bottom, they opened up on him, full volley. And can you imagine that Indiana and Ohio and the 80th Illinois was waiting with Spencer 7-shot repeating rifles. Those are deadly, deadly rifles. And at that period of time, most of General Forrest's men were using muskets and no swords, because General Forrest would not let them carry swords. He only let them have sidearms and not repeating rifles if they could find them. But they used muskets, but he required them to saw them off. Most of them had no sights for short range and fighting. They were very good at short range fighting. So the ambush was set, they're in place, and when they hit the bottom of the hill, all of Colonel Strait's brigade, the Provisional Brigade, opened up on that little unit, 40 men. And you can imagine what terrible damage they did here in this little valley. General Forrest's brother, Captain Bill Forrest, was hit in the hip by a minie-ball and was out for the rest of the war. He was captured along with a man that was wounded in this valley. Colonel Strait released him before he got ready to pull out further in the campaign. But Captain Bill Forrest was taken from here to the Colonel Saunders home up by the Town Creek area, known as the old Saunders Castle. So he stayed there many months, recuperating from his fight and the battle and his wounds here at this site. And to my right here, as we talked before, Colonel Edmondson had came across that area over there to attack Colonel Hathaway's Indiana flank over there. And they had all dismounted and were on foot. Colonel Roddy told them, dismount. Mule handlers, horse handlers, keep the men behind that ridge right there. And you will charge on foot the Yankee lines. And when they charged, the 73rd Indiana was waiting for Colonel Edmondson on the right flank over there. And Colonel Edmondson's men walked into a bee's nest. He had 40 wounded and killed that morning at that charge across there. Well, in his regiment, artillery regiment, General Forrest had a young man named Lieutenant Gould. Lieutenant Gould was a very good artilleryman. He was put in charge of 2, 3, and 5/8 inch rifles. Those rifles were deadly and very accurate. They had a range of about 1,850 yards direct fire. They were the forerunners of our artillery today. But they were doing a dang good job on Colonel Strait on behind those bunkers over there. So Colonel Strait says, they gotta go. They gotta go. We can't have that. They'll tear us up. We're gonna lose too many men with those things. So what he did at that period of time is he said, okay, 80th Illinois and the 3rd Ohio, I want you to stand by. 51st Indiana and 73rd Indiana, Colonel Hathaway, I'm going to have you charge across the marshy area on my right. And when you charge across that marshy area, you will draw these Gould's 2 rifles. When Gould swings those rifles around, what we'll do, we'll have the 80th Illinois and the 3rd Ohio to charge across this gap and come over here and capture his 2 rifles. We got to have those guns, and it worked just what he said it is. Lieutenant Gould swung the 2 rifles around to support Colonel Edmondson's men on the right flank down there. And when he did, the Yankee regiments on that side charged through this gully over here and killed the horses and captured the cannon along with the caissons and the rest of the artillery and took them back across on that side of the ridge. I assume they probably drug them back because they'd already killed the horses and stuff. If you had been here that morning, this valley would have been full of smoke, noise, dead, dying horses, mules. The draw would have been full of those. There would have been the screaming of the dead, of the dying, and the horses that morning. It was a terrible situation here. When they did, Lieutenant Gould's cannon, we proved that he did swing those guns around. We found artillery shells from this cannon to a right, way off the right, 600 yards to prove it. Lieutenant Gould did swing the cannon around just like Colonel Strait said he would do. So these guns were captured, they have a good history. They were captured at Beach Creek, Tennessee by Colonel Russell's 4th Alabama. And Lieutenant Gould was put in charge of 2 rifles after that. Forrest called them his 2 pet rifles because they did damage. They did a lot of damage to the Federals at Town Creek prior to this place. They had a range that the Yankee gun didn't have, so he was putting shells into the Yankee lines over there and they couldn't hit back until they went and got some 10-pounders. So this is Mac Carter's place here, and he has visitors here quite often from out of state, Greyhound buses, trailways, etc., touring this site. There's different versions of this fight and different versions of this battles, and this is considered, I guess, my version of the unit that took place here. And to your left, at that period of time we talked before at the meeting that General Forrest had 4 miles out, he had divided up some of his command. He said, okay, Major McLemore, I want you to go around to your left over here, up the draw, through a place called Davis Gap, which is a well-traveled road, and a lot of the men from the 1st Alabama Cavalry Union was recruited in that area. So Major McLemore did swing back in there to try to get in behind Colonel Strait at Battleground. And then he sent a deeper route. Colonel Biffle was to take another route further on up, way up the valley, and come up what we call the Stringer Gap, and about 3 miles down, and he would circle in behind Major McLemore, so that would give 2 units behind Colonel Strait. Colonel Biffle at that time would come in at what they call a crossroads. We call it Crossroads Church now, right in that area. But McLemore was late. He ran into some stiff resistance about a mile out behind the Federal lines, and then Colonel Biffle ran into some problems with travel and transportation and creeks at that time. So Colonel Biffle did come in at the crossroads up there, but he was just too late to get in behind Colonel Strait's cavalry again there. We're on location now at the ambush site, the residence of Mac Carter. And Mac has some articles here, buttons and bullets and things that's been found in this area. And also just below Mac Carter's here is where the ambush took place that morning. As they topped this hill, we had talked before, the Confederate cavalry was ambushed down in the little draw here on Mac Carter's place on the right there, and the Thomas place on the left. What we have is before us is a variation of Civil War bullets, and Mac is holding a .69 caliber now that was pulled from a rifle. If you see, it has a hole in the middle. That means the slug was hung up in the rifle and they had to re-pull it. Mac has some more bullets in here that's very interesting. In his collection, he has another .69 bullet here, than this one, and there's some 56 calibers sharps, there's some 58 calibers, and probably some 52 caliber sharps, I believe were 52 calibers. We're now on location of the 80th Illinois and the 3rd Ohio, overlooking the ambush site we had been talking about over on the opposite hill. What we have, if you see to the left, you'll see the draw from that the ambush actually took place. And this right-hand side we had talked about, and then the left-hand side, 51st Indiana and 73rd Indiana, was on that side of the ambush site. So you see, they had an excellent view here of Captain William Bill Forrest cavalry unit as they came riding over that hill into that draw, into the trap that Colonel Strait had set. And you can see the road is about the same as it was then, maybe off very a little bit. But as they rode over this ridge, just over the ridge to my rear was two short barrel cannons like this you see right here. They were 12-pound howsers, short barrels, howsers that was pulled by one mule. And if we walked up on top of the hill, you can see Captain Morton's artillery on the opposite hill on that side over there. So this is the battle site. This is the ridge line that the Federals were defending, and this is also the ambush site. If you look to my far right from the Thomas Place and on the lines of the 3rd Ohio and 80th Illinois, you'll see the house sitting on the opposite hill, the pasture over there, the ridge line, and the brick home to the left just a little bit there. That's where Morton's battery 12-pounders were. They were throwing the shells from there into the lines over here, Colonel Straight's lines, and along this ridge line. A lot of the shells were hitting in this ridge line area right here, and also behind us back where the old store was in there, and just this side of the school line over there. And if you look to the left, if you pan left, you'll see the ambush site also. The Confederate stars and bars flying over there where the Confederate lines were stretched along to the left-hand side there. We're on location of the old historical battleground schoolhouse behind me. We have just left the ambush site and the Union lines west of here. Right to my right here, if he'll pan that way, I'll point. And this area is just about where Straight's command post was located. And on his left, out of range of the big guns, was his horses and mules, and across the road now, of course, is another deep ravine that he had put mules and horses also, this being just out of the range of the 12-pounders of Morton's guns on the opposite side over there. After they had been here from about 6 until about 10 a.m., I think Strait decided it was time to pull out of here. He did not trust the old Wizard of the Saddle. He was probably one of the finest cavalry officers and most vicious cavalry officers at that period of time. Now, Forrest was, they called him a Wizard of the Saddle for one reason, is he kept the 4th Tennessee and the 9th Tennessee with him in the valley. His thinking was that he did not want General Dodge to trap him in the valley or trap his men, his brigade here. So he kept those 2 regiments behind. We don't know at what time frame he sent those 2 regiments around, but he did send Colonel Biffle a deep route around through Stringer's Gap. This gap would come out now what we call the crossroads church is. Now also he sent a shallow route, which is Major McLemore up the Davis Gap Road. Major McLemore was supposed to get in behind Colonel Strait about a half mile to our rear here, to the right as you face me. And he was going to try to cut off the Strait command here. Then the McLemore, Biffle, of course, is supposed to go a further deeper route and cut off Strait at the crossroads. Meanwhile, after this battle, he had sent Colonel Edmondson another route. This route would take him a deep route around through what we call Fairview nowadays, at the old Captain Donaldson home out there. Of course, he spent the night at the Captain Donaldson's place. They ate breakfast and they proceeded on over towards Gunter's Landing to take a route over what we call Blue Pond. Now, also pulling out from Tuscumbia fight, the Town Creek fight, was a fellow called Moses Hannon. He was a regiment of, 53rd Alabama, a regiment of partisans. These were tough cookies. The partisan took another route through Decatur, up through Somerville, over to Warrenton, and was going to have a deeper route to come out in Rome, Georgia. So the Wizard of the Saddle had this thing figured out pretty good. It's just a matter of time when he could capture his foe on this route. We are at the intersection of 157 and County Road 1114. And as you look behind me, the 157 road is almost exactly where the Old Corn Road came down. The Federal troops and Confederate troops came from this direction. They would take a turn here at 1114 on County Road 1114 to my rear, and goes to the right here as we face, as a pan this way. This is County Road 1114 over to the Crossroads Church. We're still on County Road 1114. 157 is behind there about a quarter of a mile. As you see to my right, this is County Road 1218 pointing to your left. This is the road that went down to the old Stringer Gap at Colonel Biffle was taken to cut off behind again Colonel Straight's brigade. But Colonel Biffle arrived here about an hour too late to trap Colonel Strait. Now at this period of time, Major McLemore was too late to trap him also up there at Battleground, so Major McLemore's 4th Tennessee was pressing hard along here. Well, too hard. Up just about where you see the church over there, the Crossroads Church they called it, that's where the Union lines went to the left and to the right about 1,000 yards. They set up there to buy more time for Colonel Strait. Just to my left here and my right here all the way back was the Confederate lines. They had a pretty good deal that day, and fighting was quite heavy. Morton's battery was setting along here with his 12-pound long barrel guns. So you can see it was a pretty vicious fight that morning that took place here. Next stop, of course, will be the church itself up there to get a view of what was taking place there. Behind me you see the Crossroads Missionary Baptist Church. This was the Federal lines of Colonel Hathaway that late that afternoon. What we have that to your forward north of here, we find the Confederate lines positioned along with Lieutenant Morton's battery was just about the ridge line you see there. It was heavy fighting here, buying time for Colonel Strait to get across the creek over there at Crooked Creek. What we have here is a tombstone at the Crossroads Missionary Baptist Church. This being the only tombstone like it in the area, I thought it would be interesting because this guy was George Metz, Company A, the 73rd Indiana, which had responsibility here that day of trying to slow the Confederates down.
The search for information about Union soldier George Metz, buried in the Crossroads Baptist Church graveyard, led us to his great-grandson, Jim Metz, who lives in Cullman County, and so does his mother, Kitty Young. Well, no Civil War stories have made it down the family line, unfortunately, but the family Bible has, along with pictures of the soldier's widow, Evelyn Metz, and George Metz's son, John. George Metz's Union outfit fought during the Forest Strait raid, but George didn't return to Cullman County until around 1880. The family Bible shows that George Metz and Evelyn Cooley were married in Blackjack, Tennessee in 1877 following the Civil War.
You can see the sign in this area here that marks the Forest Strait route to the right there. This is the next major little fight that took place after the Battle of the Crossroads. If you look, as I'm showing you, a lot of major events took place here that night. They found a lot of bullets here in this area, and cannonball parts back in behind this home here would indicate that the fight was quite furious. This fight took place about 4 in the afternoon. So you can see it was quite heavy, still trying to delay General Forrest's men, which is Major McLemore, from overtaking Colonel Straight's men who were trying to cross Crooked Creek. To my left, you'll see a road that turns in the front of these flags. That's the old Harvell Road that crossed the creek, the Crooked Creek. This is the point that the Federals, Colonel Straight's men, was trying to protect here to get his wagons across the creek below. If you see this road going this way to the left, it winds around in front of the old log cabin and takes a quick left down the hill there to Crooked Creek. As we pan to the left, you'll see that's where the old road came down to the mountain we were just walking down, and it crossed where the trees are. And if you look to my right up the creek, you'll see a lot of rock in there. That was called the old Harvell Ford there. This is the position that Colonel Strait was trying to hold to get his wagons and supply troops across this creek. Also, he had his two artillery pieces he had to cross. As they crossed this creek, they went buried to your left. They went about 100 yards and threw a little draw up that way and came out just a little ways from the two chicken houses. This is 1 mile exactly to what they call a Battle of Hog Mountain. Well, just as you look to the right where the rocks are, is where the Yankee lines were dug in along those ridges there. You can still see the holes from where they dug. Like I say, this took place about 5 or 6 p.m. April 30th, 1863. They fought pretty viciously over this creek, defending buying time for Colonel Strait at Hog Mountain. I have with me is Mr. Fred Wise, who lives on the estate just overlooking Harvell Ford. This is Mr. Wise's property, and he is well knowledge of the history of this area. You see that he is holding the Confederate sword here, and also a pistol in his other hand. So he really knows his business out here. Mr. Wise, would you tell us just a little bit what you know about this place?
Well, when I bought the place, I didn't know anything about the Civil War connection. And then I'd been collecting for 30 years, and then I learned more about it and through Dan Fullenwidener and Herman Stringer. And they've been helping me a lot on this place and for several years. And they've been real helpful with this. And I don't know what I'm going to do with the place yet, but I'm just holding on to it for a while.
If you look to the corner of the tree line there, where this line meets the other line, is where the old Harvell Ford came out from below at Mr. Wise's place. There was actually a little valley going down to Harvell Ford. It came across here by the trees and came across this area here, and then we went to this place over here. If you'll follow me, the camera, I'll show you where the road went over this way. Okay, the road went between those chicken houses there, the ridge line. If you can see, to the left and to the right, the old Hog Mountain Road went that way right through there. And just to the right, you can see the water tower on the ridge line of the Hog Mountain battle site. You can see it was very well laid out by Colonel Strait. And as we proceed over that way, we'll go to the Confederate position overlooking the Hog Mountain battle site.
This is overhead view of the battle scene, the West Point area, the Hog Mountain area, the West Point community here. This is the Hog Mountain area. This is Highway 157 going northwest into Morgan County. This is the general path taken as Forrest pursued Strait. Now, this would be Forrest's position where Herman Stringer will be located. This is the top of the hill, the Hog Mountain area where Strait's men were. At this point, we'll drop down close to ground level and show you the position as we look toward, across the top of Strait's men, toward the West Point area and across the location of Forrest's men. We'll swing around here so that Highway 157 is swings below us and looking toward Hog Mountain. Then we'll get a closer view This is looking, the north part of the location is Straight's position, and the bottom of the screen below the hill is Forrest's position. And again, we'll swing this down, this position down. The dark line shows the approximate path of the battle, the scene. And we'll get down here and move around. As we do, we'll position ourselves on top of the hill, the position of Straight. Now, the location where Straight had his horses, kept his horses hidden, will be in this ravine to the left bottom portion of your screen down here. That's the area that he kept the horses.
To my left, as you see, was a continuation of the road from Harvell Ford. It went between the chicken houses we explained before, came along this ridge line like this, and this is the old road here. As we followed the old road, it went up this way to the hill beyond this tree line. You can see this is called Hog Mountain, directly in front of you here. This is the mountain that Colonel Straight had dug in waiting for Forrest that night. This time it was about 6 p.m. This fight lasted from 6 p.m. until 10 p.m. April 30th, 1863. Now, as we look to the left, this is where General Forrest had assigned Major McLemore to go to the left and try to get around Colonel Straight up on the ridge line there on the hillside. Went back in this valley to his left. On our right, far right, was Colonel Biffle. Colonel Biffle had the 9th Tennessee, and to get around and try to cut him off from getting away from Hog Mountain. Colonel Biffle did get around him because the artifacts that's been found that shows that the Confederates were firing from his rear. So once again, the Confederates almost trapped Colonel Straight here at Hog Mountain. This fight was very, very severe here. To my left, or center line straight ahead, is where General Forrest lost 3 of his horses were shot from under him here. And it was hand-to-hand fighting even during the night here. And to my right, you see, was those 2 cannon that was taken from General Forrest at what we call battleground now. The 2 3 and 5/8 inch rifles were turned there and used back in this position here. The Confederate forces was along this line to our right and to our left. The Confederate artillery was directly behind me in this area right here. They had two 12-pound long rifles set up back there, pounding Colonel Straight on the hillside up there. Colonel Straight had 2 mountain housers, 12-pound mountain housers, short barrels. They were using for short range. Plus he had the 2 long-range rifles that he had captured from General Forrest. Now these rifles, once the shells were expended, Colonel Straight had no use for them. They were very powerful, very strong, and shot a long way. So after he used all the shells that landed in the impact in this area here, he took the guns, the 2 rifles, he burned the caissons and carriage, and spiked the guns up on the mountain there. So at this place right here is a very, very unique place in the history of General Forrest, because this area here was the 3rd time General Forrest had set a trap for Colonel Straight, and it failed.
It's either 1926 or 27. Dad went down in the cove looking for his milk cow, and he stumbled upon this old rifle. And he was so excited he forgot to mark the location where he found it, and he brought it to the house and said, "Look what I found." He said, "I found the muzzle loader." And there's an old man that fought with the Yankees during the war between the North and South, Mr. Perry. He lived up there where Vernell Baker's living now. In an old
Hog Mountain area?
Well, it is not directly on Hog Mountain. It's in the Willingham community. And Dad carried the gun up there, and Mr. Perry says, "I know that gun." Said, "It belonged to the cavalry." Said, "The cavalry carried it. There's no stud on the end of the barrel for carrying a bayonet." and said it's a short barrel, and the cavalry carried it, and said it is not a muzzle loader. It says one of the first breech loaders ever made. Sharps patented 1859. And the soldier that lost it, now that would be a story within itself if you could find out which soldier lost it. Sharps patented 1859, and they lost it in 1863. The gun was fairly new at the time. But it lay there from 1863 to 1926, and of course the stock and all the wood had rotted off. And but the old man Perry told Ed everything about it, and says the North used them at the beginning of the war, and before the war was over, the South stole them and shoot them back at them.
True sharp rifle. And this version here was the cavalry version. There's another version you see, like the infantry would use, with a longer barrel, and it had place for a bayonet, I believe. So this would verify that the cavalry was using this here at that period of time, see. And this is a very priceless piece of material here for Cullman County. And your dad went into a lot of detail yesterday about his dad talking about this, and I assume he found it out there at the old farm.
It was in the cove they called Hog Mountain.
Here is the portion that they were talking about in that paper, that a strap went through here, right here, so they could sling it on over the shoulder. So this is a very good copy.
Explain how it worked.
What we have here is to load this thing, you would pull down on this. It was a rolling block. This part would drop, and then you could take the shell as paper and already pre-made, as he has a copy there, and they'd slide that in there, and this one had a top cap load. This was a little bit different version than what they're describing there, so it must have been a forerunner of the Sharps, because they're talking about down there it dropped automatically into the slots. Well, this one did not. It had the old cap tap. You know, if you probably like the old cap and ball of the muzzle loaders. This actually had a little place you put a cap on top of it. So this must have been the forerunner of the Sharps. Later on, the Sharps version were definitely different than this. But this would drop down. You would take and push a round in there already made up. And then when it went back down, it clipped a little piece of paper and left an open end on the paper, and this cap would go off and ignite that and fire.
This period of time, I don't know how they got up the mountain from Morgan County up here. There's no roads then as we know of. And there is mentioned Day Gap Road. And I don't know if it existed then or not.
Yeah.
But no matter whether you fought with the North or South, each one had the same problems. And I've been told that the cavalry rode horses, and possibly officers, captains rode a horse. And when they prepared the campsite for the night, they had to find water, a source of water for the campsite. You had to water your horses, have water to cook, if you could find something to cook. And had to find grass and meadows to graze your horses through the night. Because that horse had to eat, you couldn't travel the next day. They didn't have radar back in that day and time. But if you was on guard duty, if you keep a mule or a horse with you, watch his ears. Nobody couldn't slip up on you as long as you watch that horse. You couldn't depend on a cow, but a horse or a mule would let you know somebody's coming. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And I've never read this nowhere, but it's been said that the infantrymen at that period of time, not all of them, some of them rode mules. Yeah, well, that's lots better than walking and carrying a pack. Yeah.
Looking back north of us here, as we filmed the southern position, Confederates on the ridge prior to this, this is the Yankee or Federal position along this ridge. To our left, you'll see the little gap where the cows are is where the old corn road came up. This is the main road that they cross the pasture over by the chicken houses and up to here now. And they peeled off to my right and peeled off to my left. And he had his men and also in a circle just like he did before. He had his horses and mules directed to our rear in the ravine back there. But on your left was where one of the 12-pound mountain housers that Colonel Strait used. Remember, they're short range guns. And then to our right we had the two 3.58-inch rifles that he had taken from General Forrest at Battleground. He had those set up to our right here. And this is where, after they spiked those two guns, after where they fired all the shells up, and then they spiked the guns and burned the caissons, and General Forrest buried the two rifles in this area, supposedly right here. But the main battle from here was looking north over to the pastures where the cows are that way. The Confederate long barrel 12-pounders off to my right and to the left with Captain William Morton's guns. And of course Captain Terrell's battery was also as a backup for Captain Morton at that day. When this battle, as I said before, took place from 5 or about 6 in the afternoon to about 10 o'clock. By then, it was hand to hand, and a lot of the woods was burning, and the men were running. This mountainside, including the valley, would have been total smoke that day. You wouldn't have been able to see anything because of the powder from the cannons and the rifles that was going on. You would have heard the dying mules, the horses, the screaming of the wounded, and the dying here at that place that night. It was hand to hand. So it's a very realistic battle site. This is the area we'd like to see protected for Cullman County, right here. We'll cover the right wing of the battle next if we walk up this way a little ways. From this point of Hog Mountain, you can see across the opening there that's West Point School. That's how close Hog Mountain is actually from Hog Mountain to West Point School. And behind us, of course, is the county water tower directly behind us here. We had just left a moment ago the tree line to our left. That's the old corn road we were talking about a moment ago, the major road that came to the top of this mountain. When it came to the top of this mountain, of course, Colonel Strait split his men up along this ridge line for about 1,000 yards to my right and to the left. So you're talking about 1,500 men, so it could cover quite an area. Here in this location is where he had the two 3.58-inch rifles he had taken from Forrest. And you can see he had a good elevation for firing down at Forrest off the ridge line into the Confederate lines over there. It was a very good location, well picked by Captain D.D. Smith. Captain D.D. Smith, being from this area with his 1st Alabama Cavalry, he knew the area well. He picked a very good lofty location to defend. And this battle, as I repeated before, went from about 6 o'clock at night till about 10 p.m. And to my right, to my left, over facing this way, would be Major Colonel Biffles. The 9th Tennessee went that way around trying to get behind the water tower area back here to get in behind Colonel Strait's men. And behind us is also the ravine that he was holding the mules and horses to our rear back there. And as you look towards West Point School, Major McLemore swung to our right and was going around about a 1/4 mile trying to get around and head off Colonel Strait also back in this area back here. Of course, they did not make it before Colonel Strait pulled out. It was hand to hand that night. One of the Confederates said it was very pretty that night, very beautiful. He said if it hadn't been for war, he said it'd been very enjoyable to watch. But it was, as I said before, it was a lot of destruction here. They had a newspaper with them, a man with them who wrote a lot about the story, and he said the next morning when they approached the battleground, battle site up here, there was letters from homes, rifles, clothing, and things that the Yankees had left behind here on the mountainside. The next morning, after Forrest got up here, he found his 2 pet rifles, he called them. The 2 rifles that had the long range to them, and he was very disturbed and very upset. General Forrest, when he was upset, he took it out on a lot of his commanders, his captains, his majors. He said, we won't rest till we capture the Yankees, he called them at that time, the guys in blue. Well, due to more investigations, we found out that Captain C.B. Farrell had came back after the fight over at the Lawrence plantation and put them on a wagon and hauled them to Ordnance. Probably the Ordnance would be at Selma, Alabama. And he later used these rifles again in 1864, so we know this to be a fact. This basically is what the Battle of Hog Mountain looked like. When they pulled out of here late that night, they went behind us, directly behind us, in that route. The road's almost identical now as it was then. And our next stop would be out here a couple of miles away. It's Spring Hill, where Spring Hill Church is. The next major fight took place there. Once again, Colonel Hathaway and Captain D.D. Smith was assigned to block or slow down Major McLemore's men and Colonel Biffle's men to keep them off of Colonel Strait till he gets further down the road with his wagons and his artillery. And as we move to Spring Hill, we'll explain there the Battle of Spring Hill out here took place that night, quite late that night, probably around 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock in the morning. To my right, you will see a sign that was installed by the Cullman County historical folks, and we appreciate them putting that sign. This is the first major fight again after Hog Mountain. The federal unit across picked this hilltop across here because it was good defensive area. Colonel Hathaway from the 73rd Indiana had rear guard here. Colonel Hathaway was also Colonel Strait's right-hand man. Colonel Hathaway, being from LaPorte, Indiana, and a lawyer, he was a well-knowledge man and a oratorian. So Colonel Strait, depending on him almost consistently. They set up a line across here about 12 o'clock that night and to buy Colonel Strait more time to get his wagon train down the road. Now the road went from Hog Mountain, as you see in the front of me here, it went to the right just a little bit and went in between the church now and the store, and also split across there. There's a house across from the store that the gentleman lives there that remembers cutting the trees down. It was full of bullets. We'll try to interview this gentleman later. But this church here at Spring Hill was a major battle, delay action battle after Hog Mountain. I have here with me at Spring Hill Mr. Armel Kennedy. He lives here at the crossroads by the store, and he has some very interesting things to tell us as part of the past. Mr. Kennedy, would you tell him about the trees you had here in your yard?
Well, this was an old hickory tree that had mini balls in it. I got 4 out of it when I cut it down, and it's been down about 10 years.
On this site, late at night, hard pressing Colonel Strait was the 4th Tennessee and the 9th Tennessee. To my road to the left here is just about like it was that night that these regiments came through here. Colonel Strait, also we had the 9th Tennessee and the 4th Tennessee bearing down this road behind us here. Well, Colonel Strait said that we got to slow the Confederates down again. They're pressing too hard. So he told Colonel Hathaway, he said, I want you to set up an ambush down here along this ridge line, about 1,000 yards to the right and about 1,000 yards, or a total about 1,500 yards in here, including this ridge here. We got to set up an ambush. Well, that ambush at that time was called the Cyclone Path, the old Cyclone Path. And what we did is as he set up his ambush here, it was quiet, and the Confederates said in their diary that all they could hear was the sound of the whippoorwills. Well, the ambush was set. The Confederates, here they come down this road, but they were sneaking down real quiet like. They suspected an ambush. But when the Confederates got right about here, the mules and the horses from Colonel Strait's command gave the ambush site away. So the Confederates said, hey, we're not going to go into that ambush site, so let's roll those cannons down this road right here to my left, with that time been a kind of a wagon road. Let's roll them down as close as we can get to that ambush site. We'll load them with double canister. That's 12-pounders with the cans. It's a long can full of small grape shot. So these canisters look about like this, about that long, with double those things, and a 12-pound cannon with double powder that would throw these things out like a giant shotgun. So he pushed them by hand down this road along here till they got right about here, and he opened up on the Yankee lines, he called it. That scattered them quite well along there. Of course, there was firing back and forwards there, but it's time to pull out. The Yankees said, we don't want no more of that, so let's pull out. And so they proceeded on down this way towards what they call Big Creek, Ryan's Creek area. Forest Strait sign on this old county road here. That night after the ambush took place, the Hathaway units were well hard pressed in this area here, so they turned down this road at that period of time, and the fighting was heavy down this road for an hour or so. So we'll walk down the old dirt road, which is probably still just like it was in that period of time, once we pass the county sign here. As you can see, the road has probably changed very little since 1863. It goes down about a mile, then takes into another paved road and straight on down. We were talking a moment ago of the old dirt road that you'd seen the county sign. This is the other end, continuing down from the other road up there and across this road and down now the paved road. And on our left, as we go down this road, the farm to the left, the area right there belongs to Mr. Dwight Tilley. Mr. Tilley, we've talked to him many times. He has found lots of cannonballs in his area down there, and he knows someone who remembers seeing the Yankees and the Confederate troops coming down this road. We know, in fact, this is the road that the Forest Strait route had taken place. So to the left is Mr. Tilley's farm, all that area, and is quite littered with cannonballs and bullets back in that area. So we know we're right. The fighting was continuing as they went down the road. General Forrest's men were putting pressure on his rear guard in the utmost fashion. But even though Colonel Hathaway was in charge of the rear guard, he was being pressed hard by Major McLemore and Colonel Biffle. As we look this way, you'll see the old road that leads back into the valley past this old home back there. It went from behind the old home back up through the valley and connected the road we were talking about earlier by the Mr. Twilley homestead back up that way. But As you see, the road changed very little since 1863. It winds its way back by the house and up the valley up there. It was kind of like a shortcut. When it left here, it went down across here by the road to a right and crossed the ford down there. We'll cover that area next. As we look to my right, this is a continuation of the road that we had just saw coming down out of the pasture off the valley up there. This road actually tied in what is now County Road 222 and went to my right across the field down in this little draw. As you see in this area here, the road actually went through that draw and went to Ryan's Creek. Then it was called the Big Creek. And it was also called the ford, the Big Creek Ford. Up the creek to our left here, if we pan back, we're going to go this way. And up the creek to our left here was a mill, Alexander Williams Mill, that was in process of running at that period of time. Well, the Yankee troops and cavalry went up there and burned the mill completely and everything associated with the mill. So that night, it was during the night, so quite a few things around here was in blaze at that period of time. The next event we're going to talk about will be on the other side of the Big Creek, Orion's Creek over here, where they came out. The ford crossed and they came out, and from there we'll show you the road. It continued towards Good Hope, south of Good Hope, and would continue on with the story of the Strait and Forest Raid. As you can see, the county has posted another sign out here, continuation of the Forest Strait route that day. Well, to my right is the ford of the Big Creek, or Ryan's Creek. The federal troops had set up a major defense here to slow the Confederates down one more time. As I stated before, further up the creek, north of the creek, was where they had burned the mill. Now, after the defense here slowed the Confederate troops down some, they took this road to our left, which is a continuation towards Rome, Georgia, or Blunsville, Alabama. We're on location of the old Captain John A. Donaldson farm. This farm is located about 1 mile north of Fairview, and then on County Road 1518 to the right there. This was at one time was the old stagecoach route, and a stagecoach stopped here at the old Donaldson farm. After the Battle of Days Gap, April 30, 1863, General Force sent Colonel Edmondson and Major Anderson around by Parker Spring to make sure that Colonel Abel Strait did not escape by way of the Tennessee River. Captain John A. Donaldson was a member of Edmondson's command. This was the Donaldson farm. Colonel Edmondson stopped here and spent the night. Had breakfast before beginning the chase again by the way of Gunnersville and on to Blue Springs, Alabama. This is John Humphreys, a great-grandson of Captain Donaldson farm now. The farm is still in the family. I have with me John Humphreys. He is the great-grandson of Captain John A. Donaldson. This, we said, was Captain Donaldson's farm, and Mr. Humphrey here knows the history of this place well. Mr. Humphrey, would you tell us about what took place here and about the farm?
Great-great-grandpa Donaldson come here in 1850. This was a grant from President Buchanan to Grandpa Donaldson, and first stagecoach stop was here, and also the first post office in this part of the country, and the name of the post office was Ethy, named after Grandpa Donaldson's youngest daughter. Captain Donaldson had all of his neighbors that was in the Civil War with him, the Kings, the Yarbors, the Lathams, and they were all in from this area here, and they was well familiar with it from here to Gunnersville, Alabama, where they're supposed to have cut Strait's company off, battalion, and if he had gone that way, but he didn't choose to go that way. He went toward the Georgia line from Blunsville, Alabama.
Didn't you tell me that about the old building out back where the Yankee soldier was trying to steal corn?
Yes, sir. My grandmother, she was home by herself and her small children at that time, and she heard a noise out at the old corn crib, and she raised the window and looked out, and there's a Yankee soldier stealing corn from the corn crib. So she took an old muzzleloader rifle and shot at him. She didn't hit him, but she never said last time he was still running as hard as he could go getting out of here.
Where is Captain John A. Donaldson, the Confederate captain? Where's he buried at?
He's buried about 1.5 miles from the home place here west, and his family is all buried there, and quite a few, about 15 or more Confederate soldiers is buried there with them in Lawrence's Chapel Cemetery.
General Forrest captured Strait at what is now called the Lawrence Plantation, now Cherokee County. Strait had approximately 1,300 men. General Forrest kind of tricked him by riding around and around his command, so Colonel Strait thought he had a much bigger command. So and Colonel Strait's men was awful tired and sleepy, so most of them laid down and just went to sleep. General Forrest had about 420 men in his report. He said when he captured Colonel Strait. Forrest sent Colonel Strait to Libby Prison in Richmond, Virginia. The enlisted men were exchanged shortly thereafter. Colonel Strait escaped to Washington, D.C. later in the next year and sent a letter to General Rosecrans blaming him for the loss here on this raid. He said that he had given him 1,200 sick mules and horses for this raid. And it also complained in this letter, he said that General Forrest had mistreated his men at Battleground or Days Gap. He said that the Confederates, when they captured his men, they took their shoes, their clothing, the rifles and everything, including their food. Well, General Forrest received a letter through official complaints to his command, and General Forrest had this comment. He says, "This is just the fortunes of war." Strange events took place during this time frame. General Forrest and Lieutenant Gould had a big fight later on at Columbia, Tennessee. It was over the 2 rifles that was captured just out here to our left, and now the Carter home. Now, General Forrest and Gould got in it real hot and heavy to Masonic Lodge in Columbia, Tennessee. Lieutenant Gould pulled out a pistol and shot Forrest point blank. Forrest took his pocket knife and killed Lieutenant Gould over this. At the same time, other strange events took place. In General Dodge's command, at the same time it was going on the Straits raid, Colonel Florence M. Carnion's Destroying Angels of 10th Missouri burned and blackened 10 miles long and approximately 5 miles wide, everything in what they call the Pleasant Valley. Now the Pleasant Valley went from probably Tuscumbia to Town Creek. He burned the college, LaGrange. He burned homes, barns, Masonic Lodge, and also some churches in that period of time. Colonel Corn's executive officer, Lieutenant Colonel William Boeing, tried to stop him. A court-martial later was held at Corinth, Mississippi in front of General Dodge. Colonel Corn and Bowen got into a big fight later. Bowen killed Colonel Corn over the same thing that was taking place in Pleasant Valley, the burning of Pleasant Valley. General Forrest was sometimes called Old Bedford, Wizard of the Saddle, God of War, that devil Forrest. They called him that devil Forrest because his neck would get red, his face would get red, and the eyes would turn bright red prior to attacking. So he developed the nickname as that devil Forrest. Of course, he was called the Wizard of the Saddle, as I told you, and he coined the phrase, "Get there firstest with the mostest." He's well known for that. He was a strange person. He had no education. He went from private to lieutenant general. Never had this been accomplished before, and never has this been accomplished after this period of time. He had 28 horses shot from under him. Traveled more miles than any other general or cavalry during the Civil War. Captured more than 40,000 Yankee prisoners. Takes on odds up to 30-1. You can see this was quite a man. Sherman wrote to Grant, "Keep General Forrest off my back and I will split the South in half. I will give 10,000 lives, no limit of expenditure for the capture or death of General Forrest." General Sherman also said about the war, after the war, General Forrest was the most remarkable man ever to come out of this war, North or South. His favorite horse, of course, was King Philip. He hated blue uniforms in the worst way. A Union major went into business with Forrest after the war, and he came riding up one day in uniform, and of course Philip tried to attack him. General Forrest surrendered at Gainesville, May 9th, 1865, with his old regiment, the 7th Tennessee Cavalry. The General Canby and General Thomas, "If you do not surrender, I have 94,000 men at my disposal to hunt you down. And of course, I will destroy Alabama, Tennessee, and Mississippi. It will be so bad, it will take 50 years to recover these states." Colonel Strait went back to Indianapolis after the war, and of course in the printing business, advertising business. General Forrest went back to the farming. Most of his former slaves went also with him to the farm. General Forrest died October 29, 1877 at the age of 56 years old, of supposedly diabetes. Thousands attended his funeral, both North generals, South generals, Jefferson Davis, black and white, and a lot of friends, literally thousands. He is buried in Memphis, Tennessee cemetery, city cemetery. More lives were lost in this great war than all the other wars combined that America has been involved in. Civil War? I don't really think so. Least we forget. I'm Dr. Herman Stringer. I do hope you have enjoyed this segment when Colonel Strait brought war to now Cullman County, Alabama.